The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Alldus podcast. I'm your host, Ben Sparks, and today we're continuing with our digital transformation series with a focus on ServiceNow. We are lucky today to host Josh Tessaro. Josh is a creative customer-focused technology leader, experienced in consulting large business technology organizations in the development of implementation and business process solutions. He's currently focused on the ServiceNow platform to enable transformational business processes. Josh is currently holding a position of practice director at Thirdera and is responsible for their security risk practice. Conversational topics today are going to include some of the macro trends driving transformation in security and risk, why ServiceNow is the platform of choice for enterprise customers, and his view on leadership, best practice, and mentorship. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. So obviously, look, we've seen a bit about Thirdera out there on the market. Anyone in LinkedIn will probably know their name, but do you mind giving us a high-level overview of the organization and maybe a bit of background?
Yeah, of course. So Thirdera was founded earlier this year. We have some private equity backing and are the consolidation of 5 well-respected regional elite partners. We now have a presence in the Americas and APAC, looking for a global presence here in the near future. And our goal is to become the first ServiceNow-focused global elite partner. We are on the way there. So we're currently the largest ServiceNow-only focused consulting partner with approaching 500 members. So very exciting.
Amazing and great growth. So your role, ServiceNow Practice Director for Security and Risk, break that down for me.
Yeah, practice managers for the security and risk business unit. We've recognized some of the things about the security space and the risk space require some additional focus, right? We need folks that are participating in delivering solutions there that are not just ServiceNow experts, they're also domain experts in those areas, so that they work elbow to elbow or shoulder to shoulder with the folks at customers that have lived that space for potentially decades. We've done some different things in the way that structuring that and putting focus in that area because we do believe it's a critical high growth area. The business unit is responsible for the end-to-end process from an offering perspective. So we are helping to create offerings, define what the go-to-market is, including content to marketing things that describe or educate the market on big issues, and then participate in solutioning and the delivery of those things.
Perfect. So obviously, you good overview of your current role. You did have a time before Thirdera. I'd love to know about some of the key moves you've made in your career, and I'm really thinking about some highlights on why these were so pivotal as well.
Sure. So I had the opportunity as I was finishing up my stint at college to join a large supply chain distribution company as an intern. And I was very fortunate to have that opportunity, got to see lots of the things that we're doing. I was actually an intern on the infrastructure team. And as I left college, had an opportunity to go join the help desk. And that was a very good experience. I'm glad that I was able to have that and to move on from there, and quickly got into a role in the infrastructure team as a system administrator and got to help with some really cool big projects, one of which that I'm very proud of was the opportunity to automate the deployment of ERP systems and upgrades across a little over 450 locations globally. It was something that we previously thought was going to be very manual, and we're able to effectively fully automate and execute in a much shorter period of time. And had a lot of opportunities like that in that role to take things that were manual, and I had a lot of leeway, a lot of opportunity that was given to me by my management, fiddle with things and find more automated solutions. So great experience there. Got to learn a lot about different security tools and infrastructure tools and all those types of things. Got the opportunity to move to a solutions group that had members from each of the major kind of functions within technology at the org. And we had database administrators, we had full stack developers, infrastructure and network team members, which was what I was representing. And we got tasks with various transformational projects. And one of those was ServiceNow, which I got to take the lead on due to my experience in the help desk and then obviously experience with automation. Really enjoyed that. I spent some time doing debugging and troubleshooting for different systems and found that ServiceNow was a very intuitive place to do that. It was very easy. You could see transactions end to end and found that to be much more pleasant than some of the things I've been doing recently, and was really interested in the platform. So as that finished up and I looked to what I was going to do next, I did get the opportunity to jump and join Cerna Solutions, which was at that time a smaller elite partner. I think they were elite at that point, about 15 people, and off to the races there. So I started as a technical consultant at Cerna Solutions, and that started my real ServiceNow journey, I guess.
Wow, really come up through the ranks. And we obviously see a lot of that kind of help desk to practice manager and practice leader level. It's amazing that you've probably touched on so much of the platform. But if you look back over that time, what's been one of the most kind of notable implementations you've been part of? The one that you look back on and really want to sort of be the most?
Probably two dimension, I guess. My first one, the first assignment at Cerna Solutions as I came on board was scoped application subcontract opportunity through ServiceNow. So ServiceNow had scoped the creation of an application for a company, and I was assigned as the person to go build it. And I remember just getting partially through it and running into some problems that didn't have solutions at the time. And I had 40 hours to build this whole app. And it was really overwhelming because I think I probably put 80 hours into it. And I was sitting there on my own thinking, oh boy, I am not as good at this as I thought I was, because I was supposed to do this in 40 hours, taking me a lot longer, et cetera. That was interesting. I think after the fact, looking back, I realized it was just an underscoped project. But at the time, that was a bit of a nerve-wracking thing. We got through it and I think had a really good outcome. I like to highlight that because I think a lot of people get into a new space, get into the ServiceNow space and encounter a scenario like that where they feel like they are maybe in over their head, or it's not what they expected, and it's a self-doubt moment. And I think almost all the people that I've talked to about that move past. And then the other one, and this was maybe a year and a half into my stint at Cerna, I was still a technical consultant. I got the opportunity to lead or be the technical lead on an implementation, a very large implementation for a pharmaceutical customer. And they were basically they had a number of acquisitions and a number of different systems that they were consolidating: a Salesforce environment, 2 or 3 ServiceNow environments, and a Remedy environment. And they were standing up a new ServiceNow instance to consolidate all the things those were doing across the legacy companies into kind of a single pane of glass. There were a number of consulting partners involved. A number of the global elite partners were there. We were funding all of the ServiceNow work in a very short timeline. I think it was like 4 or 5 months. And we got to work with a team, and it was a good but challenging experience. And I think the fact that we got it done on time and it's something that's still in place today and heavily used and has evolved past that, obviously, is a big accomplishment I look back on.
Amazing. And I completely agree there. And I love the fact of how reflective you were on those hours worked. And it sounds like an amazing project, probably quite complicated as probably one of, if you're in there as a technical consultant. What were some of the things you had to navigate through it?
Honestly, most of the challenges were related to the way that we divided up the project. So we had large, again, global partners you've heard of that were doing parts of requirement gathering. And some of the challenges they were trying to address were really hard. And we were at the end, right? So we were given the requirements from these folks and we were tasked with going and implementing them. And sometimes, just due to time constraints and complexity of the challenges, we got things that weren't really ready to be executed. And a lot of the challenge was trying to navigate that and find ways to interpret things that weren't really ready to go into something that was scalable. I think we did some really cool stuff. As everyone can also agree, there's probably things that I would look back on and do differently now that I have more experience.
Definitely. Talk about experience. Obviously, organizations are scaling very rapidly now in ServiceNow generally, be that an end customer or be that a partner level. You've made that move from technical consultant through to a leadership role as a practice manager. I'd love to know some of the key learns you've had on the way.
That's a good one. I think when I took the practice manager role, I had some assumptions that probably weren't correct. One of them was, hey, I know generally what needs to be done to accomplish a technical outcome, therefore I should be able to manage other people to do it. And I think I quickly realized that there's a totally different skill set in managing people than there is in completing things or directing technical things to be done. And additionally, I understood why companies implemented things and what a good solution looked like. and thought that would translate to the whole life cycle of an opportunity, right? The sales process, all the go-to-market stuff. And I think I really underestimated how much complexity there is there, which also put me in a position to learn lots of new things, which is always very fun. And then I guess the thing that, I finally learned as a team manager is your primary responsibility isn't really to manage people, it's to enable them. If you're running a team that is productive, you are doing things either personally or through process to remove blockers from people, give them ways to grow, facilitating team growth. And then the hardest thing, which is building an environment where the team is self-sufficient in a cycle of like continuous improvement, right? So meaning if you go away for a week or 2 weeks or 10 weeks, the team is just naturally doing things that improve the way they operate, the things they're delivering, and produce good outcomes. The thing that I, after the fact, realized it's very similar is the Tom Sawyer painted fence story, where
right.
Tom Sawyer is told to go paint a fence by his dad, and he doesn't want to do it. It's hot out, it's unpleasant. And he tries to trick his friends into it and can't do it, and eventually realizes that the best way to do it is to pretend like it's lots of fun and people will come join him. And there's more to that story, but the part I relate to there is the best way to get the team doing new things seems to be to do them yourself and show them being done, show them being successful, and invite people to join you. It's much easier to do that to incent a cultural change than to try to tell people to do things.
You are listening to the Alldus Podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
So I'd like to zoom out a little bit. Let's look at sort of digital transformation, more macro level. What are some of the trends you're seeing? And I'm really thinking of this focusing in on security and compliance, obviously.
Yeah, so I think that's a hard question, right? The messaging across or the meaning of digital transformation has varied greatly maybe over the last 5 or 6 years, depending on who you ask, what company you're talking about, what technology, et cetera. I think the thing that maybe has started recently to really sink in for me is more and more parts of the business are becoming more technology driven. We've got more tools to do more things that are software, that are technology, and that generates a lot of data. And lots of organizations have recognized that they can get data on most activities, and that can really be a fundamental driver for business decisions. So when I think about like digital transformation, I think about how do I take lots of the things I'm doing today across the business that potentially are related or overlap and have a technical component. How do I enable those things individually? But then also, how do I do it in such a way that collectively the data is transparent and available for business leaders to make decisions? And that really just means that things can't be siloed. There have to be technical connections across the data. There has to be overlap across the technologies. Very focused on how do I take everything, put it in a single pane of glass, and give that information back to both the participants and the decision makers.
And ServiceNow, why is that the platform of choice in enterprise at the moment, in your opinion?
ServiceNow's done some really cool things with relational data. CSDM 4.0 is a good example of that. And that kind of expands across all of the different processes it enables. So in a lot of places, traditionally, we had point solutions that did individual things. You had point solutions for policy management, point solutions for application vulnerability scanning. And all of those things were really good at what they did. But then you had a single team performing multiple functions or multiple parts of the same function that were using different technologies, and it's segmented data. And ServiceNow naturally avoids that with the way it's been architected. So when you look at things you're doing for compliance management and managing controls in ServiceNow, that gives you a lot of the work is already done then for your risk mitigations. And you get a lot of efficiency because those things are not siloed. There's things that teams were doing that were duplicate work that they don't realize that become deduplicated. Additionally, because everything's then connected and related, and you're looking at it in a holistic way, it naturally becomes the control tower for whatever that function is, whether it's risk management or security, and you get that single pane of glass view without having to do huge extra things to accomplish that.
And looking at the customers, I'm sure you're working with customers that are bringing in ServiceNow from the ground up, and you're also dealing with companies that maybe have a more mature instance. What key functionalities are you starting to see organizations use more of in the platform?
Yeah, I think the first answer to this is really obvious, right? The CMDB. I think as people are using more and more of the platform, the importance of the configuration management database becomes it's more and more critical. It's the thing that tracks ownership, tracks current state, drives relations between different business processes. So there's more and more focus on that. The other thing, and this is obviously something that I spend a lot of time on, but the other thing is the integrated risk management suite of tools in ServiceNow is seeing a lot of focus. I think people are recognizing that the way they were doing things before is not efficient and is not giving them the data they need to do meaningful things. The companies have very slowly over time invested a lot of money in different compliance efforts, different risk efforts, often with a very narrow lens, to the point where a single organization might have 15 or 20 different teams doing individual focused things. And I think there's been a big recognition that if you put all that stuff in one place, you get exponentially more for the same amount of investment out of it, because you're deduplicating things, you're enabling teams, and there's really cool outcomes there.
And as we look to the future in your crystal ball, how is ServiceNow evolving? And again, really kind of thinking for that to best suit organizations in security and risk, as it feels like it's an ever evolving kind of piece of the platform.
Yeah, so ServiceNow, I think, is adding like a service management lens to security and risk that is subtle and maybe hasn't existed before. So historically, those things have been pretty internal focused, right? And describing what that means, right? We have practitioners who are spending their day doing security things or spending their day doing compliance things. And often when we build solutions, our goal is to make that function that practitioner is performing more efficient, or to provide more consolidated data up to leadership. And ServiceNow does both of those things. But something that's also revolutionizing, I think, that is very important is the experience of the participants or stakeholders that we need to solicit for that data or for parts of the process from the larger organization. That's been something that's been largely overlooked. Been collecting compliance or risk information with email and spreadsheets, and nobody likes that. That's hard to participate in. So by centralizing that, making a better user experience, ServiceNow is knocking down some of the barriers that previously prevented real organizational change in those areas and making it a more streamlined thing for an organization to go do.
And I'm sure you probably even do this day to day, but if you were to coach a C-suite executive or a CISO on what's really needed, what are the kind of top key things needed for a successful implementation and uptake in the business for IRM, what would you hone in on?
Yeah, I think the big thing is a lot of times we're reactive and we focus on a very narrow area to address a very immediate problem. And that's often necessary. But my thought would be keep the big picture in mind as we're looking at what we're doing in individual places. Let's tie it together to the bigger vision. And that will lead to a simpler kind of large mechanism over time, as opposed to individual things you have to manage. And removing those silos is going to bring a lot of efficiency by deduplicating work and lead to other natural good outcomes, like a centralized place for participants to participate and a centralized lens on the data. And then I think one of the things that we've probably heard about enterprise risk management specifically for years and years that's kind of actually developed a real meaning for me is the fact that in order to do risk management or integrate risk management across a business, it really needs to be part of the culture. And, we need to look at it as not something that is a point solution or an individual hire or team that they go do it on their own. We need to be risk aware in many of the business decisions and planning things we're doing. So that kind of level of adoption where it's something that's part of the core culture is important. And that doesn't mean it has to take all the brain space and slow things down, but it should be something people are consistently thinking about. Everybody is part of that process. And then the final one is every organization, with all the things we're seeing going on in the wild and all the different breaches and compromises we have, is thinking about risk management. And every organization does need to invest there, but good enough is going to look different for everybody. So I think a good understanding of where your gaps are and what investment you're ready to make is super important. And then also realizing it's not just a cost. You can get value back from some of those things if you look at them the right way. There's some interesting things there that I think people haven't looked at previously.
Fantastic. Josh, you've given us a really good high-level overview of probably a number of things, mentorship and best practice and ServiceNow overall. Looking back at yourself now and the career you've had so far, if you could go back and do it again, speak to younger Josh or coach someone on the same journey, what would be the one thing that you'd say they need to keep front of mind?
I think I struggled early on with the fact that I would spend a lot of time in a very narrow area and then feel like I knew what I was doing there, and probably did in some cases, and then would get impatient with other people sometimes who weren't in the same headspace. And if I were looking back, my message would be, look, don't be impatient with everybody around you who has different skills. Each of those people has things they're good at that you can learn from or find a way to work with. And I think that I would have learned a lot more about managing people and working together and just been a better person to work with if I'd taken that to heart earlier.
Brilliant. Thanks. And it's really authentic and thanks for sharing that. Josh, this has been great. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for being on the show. We'll look forward to getting this one out to the ecosystem. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.